Welcome back to Hold On, I'm Talking Brother. My name is Joe Greenwood and you are listening to our preview of UFC 292, which is headlined by Aljamain Sterling versus Sean O'Malley for the bantamweight title, with a co-main event of Zhang Weili versus Amanda Lemos for the women's strawweight title. Live from Boston, Massachusetts, as per usual, I am joined by my regular co-host Tom Ballum. And Tom, the fights, they have stunk recently. They have stunk, yeah? Not even boxing. Actually, I take that back. Terence Crawford was amazing. But not even boxing, for the most part, has been able to satiate my need. And yet, bantamweight title fight. There is nothing better in this sport than a bantamweight title fight. Tom, please tell me you are hyped for this at the very least.
I mean, I hate to start on a downbeat note, but yeah, I'm sorry. I gotta hit you with it straight away. There is a higher peak than the bantamweight title fight, and that is Alexander Volkanovski fighting in Australia. Oh, how I long for it!
You know what? I take it back. I take it back, listeners. There's two things better than a bantamweight title fight, which is Alexander Volkanovski fighting anyone, and Charles Oliveira fighting anyone. I take it back, listeners. Those two things are the only two things that can beat a bantamweight title fight, but those two things are sublime. Yeah? Bantamweight title fight, just a slight notch below. And you know what the main problem with that, Tom? Is because Aljamain Sterling's the champion, okay? Now, listeners, we will go into our beef with Aljamain Sterling in a moment, yeah? When we break down UFC 292. But listeners, get a load of this. There are rules to our preview. Me and Tom are going to go through the main card, starting from the main event of UFC 292. We are going to pick who we think is going to win each fight. And for that, we get 1 point. And we're going to choose the method as well, which gives us 2 points. 10 points on offer. Tom is the defending champion. And it's been a scrappy year, Tom. Belt's been going back and forth. But this is a chance for you to put a marker in the ground. Say, I am the champion. Much like Aljamain Sterling in the bantamweight title fight, which is the main event, against Sean O'Malley. And now, Tom, we will get to Aljamain Sterling in a moment, but I've got a simple question to ask you. What do you think of Sean O'Malley?
For me, it's hard to like him outside the ring. It's really like he's not what he should be. You know, he's not what he's presented as. He doesn't have the kind of wit of a big persona. He doesn't have the presence of a big persona either. All he has is funny coloured hair that's sometimes an afro.
Right. Yeah, you
and a leather jacket.
Yes, which Merab wore very well, I must say. You opened your response with the sigh of a 30-year-old man, or a man in his 30s, I should say, talking about something that those darn kids are into.
I've revealed it.
Yes,
yeah,
listeners, we are in our 30s. And Sean O'Malley's personality, I've got to say, for me as well, Tom, not my cup of tea. However, I think the hype is mostly real with Sean O'Malley in terms of most parts of his game. But there's something that I cottoned on to this week that I was thinking about. Like, you know, that Piotr Jan fight was superb. His performance against Jan was absolutely incredible. But there's two fights that I particularly want to think about in relation to Sean O'Malley. And that's the Marlon Vera fight. And that's the Pedro Munhoz fight. The two times he fought ranked opponents, top dogs, top of the division. And in one of them, he got mashed by Chito Vera. Like, mashed. Yeah? I don't care what he says, and I don't care what his fans say, like you. He got mashed in that fight. And then Pedro Munhoz, who did a very simple thing, which was follow a game plan of switching stances with Sean O'Malley and throwing low leg kicks. Now, he's facing Aljamain Sterling, someone who's trying to make a claim as the best bantamweight to ever do it. And I wonder, what is Sean O'Malley's game plan for this fight? Like, what is going to be his approach to it tactically and mentally going into this? Do you think that Sterling's a huge hurdle for him to overcome, first off?
I think that's undoubtable. I mean, we've got to recognise Sterling now where he sits in the division, what he has accomplished, you know, and that is he's a big hurdle for anyone. He's a huge challenge, and he showed that in the way that he overcame Cejudo, or at least he did in some people's books, and that the judges were were amongst them. So, he's still there. He's still the man in the division. And O'Malley, well, he cited 2 fights in which he's had difficulties. Yes, Munhoz and Vera. They present a very different challenge to Sterling. We haven't seen him fight anyone like Aljamain Sterling. And that's without recognising Sterling as the best, which I think he's shown that he is. I'm just talking about a wrestler, Joe. Any pressure wrestler, anyone who can take your back and keep you in that position, unable to escape, once he's got the dominant position. There is no comparison on O'Malley's record. So that's a big unknown.
That's a really good point about that. And, that goes...
But Joe, let me just add one more thing there. I think you think, and I also think, and most people think, that they do know. That they do know what happens when O'Malley meets Sterling. My only question would be, how? How do we know? It's an assumption. Maybe O'Malley is something of Israel Adesanya, the bantamweight version. He's been working on his game. He's got a deadly sprawl. He keeps his center of gravity where it needs to be. He can get off the cage. He can stay in the, within the lines in the octagon. He's got fantastic movement. We know that. So maybe it doesn't go how I suspect you think it's going to go.
Well, the thing with O'Malley, and he hasn't faced a wrestler yet. That's for certain. But he's shown lots of things that would make you think that he can have success against a wrestler. Now, he was taken down a lot against Petr Yan. Petr Yan took him down, I think, 6 times. Quite a lot of control time in there. Yet, when there wasn't control time, O'Malley was landing significant shots. He was landing superbly on Petr Yan as well. And do you know what he did, and we saw in that fight, is how good his lateral movement is. His control of his lateral movement. Now, I think we can assume, quite rightly, that Sterling's going to come out like a house on fire, I think, against O'Malley. First round, he's just like, I'm going to get my hands on him, I'm going to wrestle him. And it's going to be wide hands, jab in just to try and get jab, doesn't even care if he lands, so he can maybe just grab him. That sort of front kick up the middle from the rear leg that Sterling throws, just to push him back to get him up against the fence. And we've seen O'Malley in that position up against the fence. His lateral steps are really, really good. And by that, I mean his lateral steps aren't too big so that he gets squared up, and he's not too little so that he's moving but not really moving away. He hits that sweet spot perfectly. And what he does with that lateral movement is that because his step isn't so big that he gets squared up, he's able to actually disguise the distance in that he's able to then slightly switch stances in his lateral movement. So let's say he's moving to his left. He will then make his right leg the lead leg so that he can be slightly southpaw. Or he'll be slightly orthodox if he makes his left leg the lead leg ever so slightly. And it will then create a confusion for you of he's throwing out his right hand and you think it's a jab, but really it's a power punch. He's really good at disguising his stance switches in those lateral movements.
Yeah, Saif Saud did a great job breaking that down on the UFC's YouTube channel.
Oh, damn.
Big nod to you, Joe. Yeah, he echoed those sentiments.
Did he really?
He might have been onto the phone to you beforehand. I don't know how big we've got yet, Joe. I suspect we're really big. So no worries, Saif. We got you. Come to us.
I
next
feel
time
big.
If you're in a pickle. Yeah, that's exactly what Saif Saud had to say. Of course, he disguises their weapons. He upsets you, pulls you into those traps. Where you're concentrated on the weapons that O'Malley actually has out of both stances. He of course he has a natural preference, but he can really hurt you from positions you don't expect it because of those subtle changes of stance that obviously create different weapons on either side. And if you're not a striker on that same level, it's very easy to find yourself with your guard in the wrong position, eating a big shot. He can also pull you into spinning back kicks. He throws out the occasional wheel kick. He's quite a creative striker. And if you go with him, he might upset you. However, it's not so easy to fight with that kind of flair and freedom when the threat of your opponent reading it is so severe. When the consequences mean you're on your back, hopefully, because you could be on your front, Joe, and you might have Aljamain Sterling with a triangle wrapped around your body, hands around your neck, squeezing you unconscious.
Yeah. I mean, that's
a little bit too flamboyant. Your fancy little back kick, Joe. Nah, don't care about that. You're on your back, or worse, you're on your front. So it's not easy to fight with that kind of flair, that kind of freedom, when those are the consequences.
Yeah, I mean, that's the interesting thing about Sterling, is that his grappling is such that, he doesn't really care about mounting or anything like that. He prefers the back. Like, he prefers to take the back. And there have been times where he's had people on their back and he's kind of like let them get up so that he can attack the back from there. I mean, the TJ Dillashaw one was one of those, but again, that was a one-armed fighter, quite literally a one-armed fighter against TJ Dillashaw.
Well, I think it's an important time now to highlight Petr Yan and his trials and tribulations with Sterling in their second fight. Of course, Yan was a man who was well equipped to negate Sterling's style, but he was so frantic in scrambling and escaping positions that in those little kind of transactional moments, those in-between moments, he just left a little opening for Sterling to take the back, and of course he lapped it up and won the fight in doing so.
Well, remember the first time...
It's hard to imagine that...
Remember the first time that him and Yan fought?
O'Malley won't make those mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, remember the first time Yan fought Sterling? He took Sterling down a lot. Trips, takedowns, just to, tire him out. Well, he didn't really particularly want the takedown. He just saw the opportunity there and took it, whereas Sterling was just not at it in terms of takedowns against Petr Yan. Now, admittedly, that's a different timeline now. I think Sterling went out way too hard in that fight, and he realised that as well. And has subsequently become a very good 5-round fighter. Paces himself really well. He won rounds 3 and 4 against Cejudo. I think it was 5 was the clear one for Cejudo at the end. Admittedly, it was the 5th round, but still 3 and 4 went to Sterling. And that's the other thing about Sean O'Malley. A man who has never fought in a main event is now fighting for the title. Something that I'm kind of inherently against. I'm kind of against guys not fighting for a title unless they've had a main event. Now,
is that you coming out anti-hype train? Is that... Come on.
No, I love
Look into your soul, Joe.
No, I love hype.
Exactly.
Trains. I love hype.
Sometimes that's where they take you, Joe. They take you to the main event on a pay-per-view, even though you've never been on the main spot before. I'm not against that.
I mean, just in terms of fairness of what I think how a ranking should work, if we're going to apply it. But then obviously this is matchmaking. This is a matchmaking model. They're going to do this. But he's never fought 5 rounds. And he's facing a guy who is pretty good at fighting 5 rounds. Not the best. Obviously, that's Volkanovski. And then the second best is Max Holloway. Which, 2 names that I make pointed remarks towards. I mean, realistically, if O'Malley gets taken down consistently in this fight, you are just going to say Aljamain Sterling's going to win this fight from that point on, aren't you? If he takes him down in rounds 1 and 2... and just tires him out, just works him over and over and over, he's winning that fight. There's not a way O'Malley will have that gas to land that sort of shot on him late in the fight to put him away. No?
Well, I don't know. I don't know about that. I mean, we all remember when Edson Barbosa caught Kevin Lee after being absolutely dominated, on the mat for a couple of rounds. And then he caught him with a spinning wheel kick, I believe, and Kevin Lee did the famous chicken dance. Yeah. I would say O'Malley as a striker, not with the explosion of Barbosa, but certainly with the accuracy and the panache to land a shot like that late on. So I wouldn't say that threat is entirely diminished, but of course you are talking about a Hail Mary shot there. A Hail Mary shot that failed for Barbosa, I should also state. Yeah. Kevin Lee went on to keep that train running. So it's a tough fight for O'Malley. It really is. However, I did say the same thing last time he fought against Petr Yan, and he shook the world for some people. Some people say that Petr Yan won the fight. And, you know, maybe it's time to stop underestimating him, Joe. Are you ready to put your confidence in Sean O'Malley to win this fight on Saturday?
I do not underestimate this man at all. I think he is a very good striker. He doesn't really throw combinations. It's mostly single shots that he sets up.
Can I just pick you up on that, Joe? Very good. There's a bit of disdain in a comment like very good. Is he not elite?
Well, when I say elite, I'm thinking Israel Adesanya. The bar is set by certain guys. And are they at that bar? Are they at that level? No, he's not at the level of an Adesanya. No. I mean, would you say Pereira is elite?
Purely as a striker?
In MMA, I would say Adesanya is the bench. He's elite. He's the best. He's whatever. And O'Malley is not on that level. So he's very good, which I think is a fair thing to say. He doesn't throw combos, really. He throws single shots and he throws combos after he's hurt his opponents. Now, admittedly, the opponents that he lands those combos on are Chris Moutinho. Yeah? So, he's not really done that against Marlon Vera, Pedro Munhoz. Did do it against Yan, where he did this really lovely when he switched stances. Sort of jab, feint, see the reaction, switch his stances, he moves back. Does the jab feint again to then hide the fact that he's actually stepped in and threw a cracking left. The one that rocked Yan really badly, I think it was in the third round, where he sent Yan sort of stumbling. So he has that sort of power to him, and timing, and distance control. It's just, can he do that against Aljamain Sterling, Tom? That's the major question. Because we know what Aljamain Sterling wants. He wants the back take. He wants to press you. He wants you off balance. He wants to be able to sort of tip you over and get to the back from there. That's what he wants to do. Sean O'Malley wants to disguise his movements and land big single shots and then follow up with combos from there.
I feel like, Joe, we're culminating in our predictions here, but I just wanted to get one thing in before we do give them out, and that's that I feel like we haven't given Sterling quite a fair shake here. We've kind of made him sound a little bit one-dimensional. And I think he's shown enough, especially in the last fight against Cejudo, that actually we know he's an unorthodox striker, but ultimately that unorthodox nature is what upsets Cejudo, really.
Yeah.
Cejudo had the tools, I think, to win that fight, but because of Sterling's style, and I'm not talking about a pressure wrestling style here, I'm talking about the way he threw his shots. It was him who overcame, at least according to the judges.
Well, the thing is that he wasn't really using his striking to take Cejudo down in the same frequency he probably would against Sean O'Malley. He knows he can't do that. And I think his striking, as you say, has got a funk to it. It's sort of, his jab has kind of got like a thudding sort of quality to it. It kind of sticks it out there, leaves it out there to either then grab hold of you or to hide and impair your vision, which I think is really good. But yeah, I don't think that he has the layers of striking attack of O'Malley, and I think that's a fair thing to say. I think it is mostly to instigate grappling exchanges, but if he can do damage on the feet, he will. I just think he needs to avoid falling in love with that sort of thing, and he needs to still utilise it towards the game plan, which will be wrestling, to get to back takes, to get the body lock triangle, to hold that position and work from there, and maybe to get a sub, or to maybe mount ground and pound finish. Now, Tom?
Joe, give it to me. Give it to me.
Well, my prediction, Tom, you want it?
Yeah.
I'll give it to you straight. Sean O'Malley knockout win.
He's on tilt, listeners. This is what happens. This is what happens when you just pound Joe into the ground, win after win after win. This is where he goes. I have picked Aljamain Sterling to win this fight by submission, Joe.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. It was Sterling by decision that was the one that I was leaning towards. But I'm like, you know what? There's something about this O'Malley lad where I'm like, is there just a bit of zhuzh? Is there a bit of that in the air? Has he got some weird...
There is.
There is something about him.
It's possible. Be hyped, listeners. Watch this fight, because there really is. It's not a Hail Mary. It's not a shot to nothing. Could see something spectacular. And that isn't Aljamain Sterling wrapping up a you know,
body triangle. Yes, the body triangle and back takes. Yeah, no, it will be from O'Malley. But I don't know. It was more. It was a real vibes pick. That's what I've just gone for there, Tom. It was a very vibesy pick.
Joe, you're in a dark place in your life. The monotony, the dullness, the grind
of life,
of the railway tracks, you know, and you want a bit of pizzazz, you want a bit of fun. I understand, mate. You pick Sean O'Malley, you go for it.
Co-main event: Zhang Weili defends against Amanda Lemos for the strawweight title. Weili has not fought since, was it the Esparza fight last November? God almighty, it's been a long time. Yeah,
but she put down a big marker there, taking out the champ, you know. You have to acknowledge that Esparza was the champ.
Yes.
And widely held to be one of the dominant wrestlers in female mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
And she just got absolutely freight trained by Zhang Weili. So respect to her, sit on the fence, you know, and wait for the next comer to come, Joe. The next comer, Amanda Lemos. She's been building a bit of a highlight reel, but I have a confession to make, Joe.
Go on. You've never seen a fight?
I didn't know this fight was happening until until 5 minutes before our pod.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Is that an indictment on you or on the UFC for promoting it? Or not promoting it?
It's the UFC. It's the UFC. I mean, like it didn't really resonate with me. I guess we have so few like stars in women's mixed martial arts. Lemos does have the kind of highlight reel to build a promo off of. Zhang Weili is the real deal.
Yeah.
So ultimately, you've got to look towards. I guess it's the depth in the division. There's no like culmination of the great climb to the top.
Yeah.
You know? It's just suddenly.
Well, Lemos,
3
fights ago, lost to Andrade by standing arm triangle. You know, which was dope. Let's be real, that was a dope finish, but that was 2 fights ago, and since then she's beaten Michelle Waterson and then Marina Rodriguez, both of them finishes. The Rodriguez one was particularly impressive with the hooks, with the G and P to follow up. No, it was up against the fence, I take that back. It was 2 impressive finishes, and she has got power in her hands, for sure. It's just, does she have...
Joe, the win against the loss to Andrade, would you say that's aged well?
No, Andrade has lost 3 times this year, hasn't she? No, she's lost twice this year.
Including one of the worst knockouts.
She's lost 3 times this year. She's lost 3 times in a row and fought 4 times.
And the one, not the most recent loss, but the one prior to that was embarrassing. I'm still cringing, Joe. And so if you're losing to Andrade, I'm struggling to get hyped for you. How does Amanda Lemos win this fight, barring something freaky happening?
You know what? I think it just has to be attritional. I think it has to be Zhang versus Joanna too, sort of like levels of... I'm just going to have to empty everything out here, because I think Zhang Weili she's phenomenal. Like, I love watching her fight. I think if you don't enjoy watching Zhang Weili, I think there's something up with you. The fact that she went out there and just mashed Esparza into the ground with wrestling and grappling was just like, yeah, I'm going to beat you at your thing. I'm sorry, man. She beat Rose in the rematch. All right, I know Rose has been QAnon'd out of the division and she's moved up to 125 now, but like sorry. But Zhang Weili, I think, is immensely exciting. Like, it's great to watch, and I want to continue with her as champion. I like it when there's someone at the top who's just like, bring me the next contender. So that's why I've gone with Zhang Weili by submission. She knows that Lemos can be subbed. She knows that she can get subbed in a very unorthodox way, in a kind of slightly amateurish vibe. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of got an amateurish quality to it. Of like, how do being unable to get out of that. And Weili's probably looking at that path of least resistance. I'm going to keep proving myself. Submission win for Weili.
Yeah, Joe, I got to be honest with you. I had a big dilemma here over my pick, I struggled with it, and the struggle I was having was, would it be a TKO from ground and pound, or would it be a submission? And I decided it would be a ground and pound beatdown with a sub mixed in there to kind of put Lemos into a horrible place, and then just a pounding until the ref steps in. So that's what I'm seeing. I've gone Zhang Weili TKO.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like Piotr Jan versus Aldo sort of GMP. Is that what we're talking about?
Oof.
Just barbaric.
If we get a fight like that, Joe, we've been blessed, because that was a great fight. And I'm also very impressed with Lemos if she can take it to Weili for 5 rounds or 4 rounds that Aldo managed.
For sure. Right. Let's talk about
Joe. You remember that? You remember that era? Just a little nod to that. You mentioned the bantamweight, Petr Yan, the all-comer, going on for 10 years of bantamweight domination. It was obvious. It was written.
Yeah.
It was announced on that night. And just look where we are now.
I know. If he hadn't turned that pissing knee, he could have had that Sandhagen fight. He could have had Cejudo. He could have had Marlon Vera. He could have refused to fight Merab on the basis he'd already fought Aljamain. Just no. I took one of them, By the way, sorry, I made a pointed reference before about the sort of best 5-round fighters, and I said Volkanovski and Holloway. Aljamain Sterling saying he'll 99% leave the division after this fight, no matter what, probably meaning if I win, and then wanting to get champ status. So he's like, I'm going to leave the division, but I'm not leaving the title, because I want to keep hold of that for when I face Volkanovski, because he knows if he's not a champ, you ain't getting that Volkanovski fight. Yeah, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, fight Bryce Mitchell. Yeah, fight Evloev. Like, that's what they're going to say, aren't they? Which would be just such shit up. Fuck you to him. Like, they really hate him.
Yeah, he can't catch a break. He really can't. No. But, if he goes and puts a marker out there on Sean O'Malley, it will be hard to deny him. I think there's a room for some hype to build there. I think there could be some interest. So yeah, let's see. It's all going to be settled here on Saturday. We're going to know the direction of bantamweight.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about this featured fight. Interesting one here. Ian Machado Garry is back. Aldi Conor McGregor himself. He's against Neil Magny. Originally supposed to be Hands of Steel Jeff Neal against Garry, but he had to pull out due to injury. And now we get Magny, the gatekeeper's gatekeeper, if you will. You know what I mean? Like the thinking man's gatekeeper, or the old school gatekeeper, if you will, against Garry here. Now, we know what Magny does. Jab, stick it in your face, clinch, take you down, make you have to get back up, clinch, take you down, jab, make it ugly, make it horrible, drain you, little kicks, little nasty little kicks from distance, from range. And we know what Ian Machado Garry likes. Lovely crisp boxing, slipping in and out of range, pull counters, action, pushing the action against his opponents. Why is it though that I can just see Neil Magny's hands getting raised and Garry just looking there going, I can't believe I've got 30-27 by this bloke? That's not my pick, by the way. I haven't made my pick yet.
No, of course not. Of course not. I think it's a reasonable outcome. It's certainly one that we've seen before for guys fighting Neil Magny. So it is a bit of a surprise to see that Garry goes in here as the biggest favourite on the main card.
No, really?
Biggest favourite, Joe. So that could be Joe's minty bets moment.
Oh, yeah. I'd stick your fiver on Magny.
Yeah, what you'll get there, Joe, is 4-1.
No,
4-1
really?
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah,
love it. Combine that with a Zhang Weili sub win, or you're in for a good one there.
I mean, the thing is, Joe, Magny, he has been smoked a few times. Yes. People have absolutely run through him. Obviously, the infamous beatdown. Ponzinibbio in Argentina, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah,
down somewhere in South America. Oh Lord, we were calling time on Magny then. Doctors were united across the globe that Magny should not be fighting because Ponzinibbio gave him an absolute beatdown.
Yeah.
Ponzinibbio, Joe, far less technical striker, far less crisp than Ian Garry. Would seem plausible that...
but is there a thing, though, that, like, actually, that the more crisp and technical you are, the more you fall into the Magny trap? Do you know what I mean? Where it's just like, we can technique for technique, but if you're going to come blitzing at me with hooks with no rhyme or reason, then, brother, I might be in a bit of trouble here. You know.
So a little nod to Jeff Neal, who was one who fell into the Magny trap and lost a unanimous decision back in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking here at the guys who have beaten him recently. Michael Chiesa, Shavkat Rakhmonov, Gilbert Burns.
Yeah.
What are we seeing there?
Yeah, Rakhmonov and Burns. Yeah, we're not seeing a striker in the mould of Ian Garry. We're seeing guys who can mix it up and beat. If Magny takes it into those dirty, filthy areas, where he's kind of got his big frame, all gangly, it's all over you.
The hook,
you're pressed against the cage.
The underhook, yeah. He's pushing you around, so he's kind of like opening your body and digging you to the ribs. Yeah.
Joe, his dreads are flicking in your face. He's towering over you, and it's a bad place to be. And Rakhmonov was having none of that. But he has certainly got some different tools to Ian Garry. So I like your bet here, Joe. As one to look at, because people are really reading a lot into Ian Garry after his last win. Let's take a little nod to Ian Garry here. Had some doubters, is he the real deal? But he was giving Daniel Rodriguez a ranked welterweight who has, let's say, some good fundamentals. He's a test, and Garry just put a hurting on him.
Yeah, I mean, he whooped him. He totally whooped him. Like he drew him into this head kick that then dropped him, and then got the ground and pound from there. And he at no point did it feel like he was never not in control of that fight, even when Rodriguez was on the attack. It felt like Garry was totally in the moment, totally comfortable, and he's gotten more and more comfortable with each fight, apart from the Keenan Song one, where Song caused him some problems in that first round, rocked Garry. I think he dropped him to a knee. That's just a little image that flicked into my head there, Tom. But I feel like you're not having it.
I'm not having that. I think he got a little bit careless against Song Kenan. That's what I think. I think he was really feeling himself, He was really feeling himself.
He was, yeah. He was like, I'm flowing right now.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. He was trying to add to his highlight reel, and he got caught at the end of the first round, but yes, he overcame that small bump and went on to, he whooped Kenan. It wasn't a close fight.
No, not at all. So Tom, we've talked over these two gentlemen here. Both share a win over Daniel Rodriguez. Magny had the Darce choke finish in the third round. Garry with the first round finish. Obviously, one is probably a bit more spectacular than the other. And, Magny, in that Rodriguez fight, built up the energy and pressure from there. But we've seen that Garry can keep going at this high rate and actually finish people late into fights as well. So I don't know if this is going to necessarily be one that gets finished early, Tom. But you know what? Give it to me. What are you feeling for this fight? Ian Garry versus Neil Magny. Give it to me.
Well, I mean, our discussion here has played out my thoughts exactly, Joe. I do think this is a potential banana skin for Ian Garry, and I don't think Magny's a man to take late notice.
No.
However, I have to look at that last performance over Daniel Rodriguez. I had to go with my heart, Joe, what I want. I like it. Not necessarily all about Ian Garry's whole shtick outside the ring, but inside, he's a lot of fun to watch.
Yes.
In a way that Neil Magny never will be. And I've picked Ian Garry to win this fight by TKO.
Wow. I love it, Tom. Because you know what? I picked
Chew.
Oh, yeah, I picked Ian Garry by knockout. I think he's going to flatline Magny. Like, I think he's going to flatline him, and I think he's going to cut the most cringe promo you've ever seen after that. Like, it's going to be awful. So yeah, I am excited to see what Garry can do here against Magny. And you know what? If he wins this, I would still love to see the Jeff Neal fight. I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
Keep him away. By the way, I don't. Kamaru Usman's coming back. I do not want to see him against Usman. I do not want to see him against... I mean, I don't think he'll fight Gilbert Burns anyway because they're teammates. But you know what? I would actually be up for him versus Jack Della. I think would be an interesting one. 2 prospects, put them together. I know you're against the prospects fighting each other early. I'm more of a fan of it, personally, Tom. But you know what? We all like different flavours.
I can tell you, Ian Garry, he'll be looking much higher up the division, given what what the comments he's made on record. He's sat at 13 now, Magny at 11. Ahead of him in the top 10, Joe. He's kind of fighting a bit of a wrestler's alley, but there is Stephen Wonderboy Thompson at number 7. He's looking for a big fight himself.
Oh, don't. Well, I know Jack Della's got Kevin Holland for September, which I'll tell you what. I'll ask you this: what's the better name on the record, Holland or Magny?
Oh, it's Magny. It's Magny.
Yeah,
Magny. Yeah. For what he's done in the sport, what he represents as a challenge. Yeah, it's a test. It's a hurdle that should be cleared.
Okay, cool. Let's talk about this fight. A fight that I only learnt about 5 minutes before we started recording, Tom. There's actually on the main card. Mario Bautista versus Damon Blackshear. Blackshear on a week's notice after fighting a week ago. Won by Twister, the 3rd ever in the UFC. Very impressive to get that. He faces Mario Bautista in the bantamweight division. Both unranked guys who've put a couple wins together now. Maybe sort of hinting at, getting in towards the sort of outside the rankings sort of opponents maybe they could start getting to. That's what you have to graduate to. You beat Brian Kelleher, you beat a Guido Canetti, you defeat, Luan Lacerda, however you say it, my mistake. You face those guys, and then you get each other, right? Mario Bautista, Tom, any thoughts on this man? Because I have very little. I will say I was impressed by his last win over Guido Canetti, even if I do think Canetti is about as good a can you can have in the UFC.
Yeah. I mean, I think you've summed it up well there, Joe. A little nod to the professionalism of Hold On and Talking Brother. Another confession there. 5 minutes of preparation. But that's what you get. That's about the kind of preparation that Damon Blackshear has got coming in here. It's a risk against Bautista. Something of a specialist. And that's not the type of man you want to take on 1 week's notice. So I think, honestly, whoever's in Blackshear's corner here, young fighter, promising, probably guide him away from fights like this. Yeah.
Give it a couple weeks before you get back in there. And give it a couple weeks before you're facing a guy like this who is, he's so wrestle heavy. I'm saying that Blackshear's actually has more takedowns, averages per 15 minutes than Bautista, but they average the same amount of sub-attacks. So basically, Bautista spends less time on the ground, but he's more effective with it than Blackshear, who is more sort of positional over submission. But he's more accurate with his takedowns, though. But maybe Bautista wants to go to that ground from there. I don't know. I'm not really feeling this fight, to be honest. I don't really have much to say. Oh, sorry, I got it the wrong way around. Bautista has got the higher frequency of takedowns over Blackshear. Sorry, my mistake. I got it completely the wrong way around. I've done a shit job of previewing this fight, Tom. And I apologise, listeners.
Can you finish that beautiful promo cut for Hold On, I'm Talking Brother with your prediction?
Bautista decision.
Can I make a request? Can we make this the intro on the YouTube page?
Sorry for doing such a shit job, listeners. Yeah. I shan't be clipping this bit. Yeah, Bautista decision.
Yeah, it's a Bautista decision as well here, Joe.
Cool. Marlon Chito Vera is back. He faces Pedro Munhoz. Now, how would you describe the feeling of Marlon Vera when he fights in the UFC?
The feeling? Like the feeling of watching him, or the feeling in the crowd?
Like when you watch him, like what do you think of him and his style?
I'm a Marlon Vera truther, Joe. I've revealed it in the past. I'm not having it, Joe. I'm not having it. He's had some fantastic highlight reel knockouts against ranked opponents that have propelled him to the top of the division. Also, as you say, with a win over Sean O'Malley, so quite the resume there. However, those ranked opponents come in the form of, and highlights come in the form of Frankie Edgar and Dominic Cruz, men far into their retirement, pulled off the beach to be humiliated in front of thousands of people, their crying children, as Marlon Vera knocks them out brutally. Yeah. Such was the fate of Frankie Edgar. So look, Joe, we say he's a slow starter. We say he's really analytical. He's watching every move. He's looking for your opening, Joe. He's going to pick you apart, and then he loses 5 rounds or 4 rounds to Corey Sandhagen.
Oh, he lost all 5 for me.
Goes down like a
he lost
like a damp squib.
It does,
found out.
Yeah, it does piss me off a bit when I see that Vera and O'Malley are already saying, "Oh, if we win, we're facing each other for the title," which would be number one bullshit, brother. Your man Sandhagen's a beast. He literally has called out Merab. He was going to face Umar Nurmagomedov. He took Rob Font on a couple weeks' notice and beat him handily. And then you're saying Marlon Vera, who got absolutely his shorts pulled down by Sandhagen, and said, "You ain't shit, son." Yeah, he had that done to him. And yet he's going to get a title shot because, what, he had some weird win over Sean O'Malley? Bullshit, brother. Bullshit. Not having it. However, I will say that he does fight with a chip on his shoulder, which I do appreciate. He does fight with nasty intent in spurts. And he is one of the weird, rare fighters who is ranked in a good division, who has a negative strike differential. He gets hit more than he lands. It's just that when he lands, he tends for the most part to really rock falls. The Rob Font one being the famous one where he was outstruck by, I think, over 100 strikes. And yeah, he won every single round, so tells you something about what happened there. Pedro Munhoz, on the other hand, very good at following a game plan. Unless it's Corey Sandhagen, where Sandhagen just brought them down into absolute muck of depravity of fighting, which we both love. But he is a good game plan, and he does stick to a game plan. And the game plan here against Marlon Vera is wrestle him, take him down, make him feel uncomfortable, make him feel awkward. Don't let him get reads on you on the feet. Take away that time from him. Take rounds away from him. Because if he goes into a third round needing a finish and he doesn't have any information on you because you've just wrestled him and clinched him and made things awkward for him, I actually don't see a way for Vera to get the win. I will say that the important part of this fight is the second round, because I do think Munhoz will win the first. I think Vera will win the third if it goes to a decision, and it will be down to that second round there. Tom, if I'm just going to go from past performances, what's your feeling about Pedro Munhoz, and what's your feeling about him matching up against Marlon Vera?
I think Munhoz is very strong and underrated in the same way that Vera is overrated. I think Munhoz is a problem for Chito Vera. What does Vera have? He has power. He hits hard, and when he hurts you, he rocks you, he can capitalize. I think Munhoz is the perfect tonic for that, because Munhoz is a man who can march forward, take them on the chin, and hit back with greater volume, and also landing vicious leg kicks along the way. His only limitation is his reach for me, in that he always is fighting in the pocket or reaching with his legs. But I think Chito will oblige him in that space, much to his detriment. So I fancy Pedro Munhoz here, Joe. Really? My Minty Bets moment is it's a pick on Pedro Munhoz at 2.7.
No.
It's a quite significant underdog here. And you know what, Joe? I fancy him to beat Marlon Vera. I've picked Pedro Munhoz by decision.
Wow. That's a really strong pick. I like it a lot. So much so that I've actually picked Marlon Vera by decision, Tom. I can't help it. He's going to land some stuff on Vera that's going to get him to react and flinch in ways that's going to give him some information of some kind. I just wish that Marlon Vera just wasn't so in love with the idea of knocking people out. Like, if he actually had a bit of a clinch game, I think I would like him a lot more. Which I know annoys people, the idea of, like, not striking, or not, like, attacking something. But if he had a clinch game, I would appreciate him much more. I don't know, he that performance against Sandhagen was very strange, and I think Sandhagen actually, he's a real antidote for some of these guys, or he's a real, like, blanket for some of them now. Like, you saw it with Rob Font, you saw it with Marlon Vera, like, I couldn't get anything going. Yeah, Corey Sandhagen is really good. He's really good, and you're not as good as him, and there's nothing wrong with that. He just finds a way to just, like, how is this striker just beating me constantly? Because he's wrestling you, that's why. That's why he's doing it. Anyway, Marlon Vera by decision, but I love Pedro Munhoz.
And Corey Sandhagen, it would seem.
Oh,
yeah, Joe,
I think number one, Corey Sandhagen. Maybe my favourite fight.
I think, just bringing it back to this fight, I think it could be a blood and guts type performance. I think they'll both land. I think they'll both hurt each other. And it could be some fun, Joe. I like it.
Are you thinking like when Vera fought Davy Grant, maybe? Like that sort of blood and guts, blood and thunder? Oh, if we had some of that. Oh, yeah.
I just think they'll oblige one another. I think they're kind of made to collide in the centre of the octagon. So, yeah, looking forward to the fight. I think it's a nice opener for the main card. But now, Joe, we glance at the prelims. This is some fan favourite moment where we give one little glance here to the prelims and we both pick our fight to watch. Joe, what is tickling your fancy?
There's one answer for both of us. Chris Weidman's back and he's facing Brad Tavares, the All-American Chris Weidman and the all-natural wink wink Chris Weidman. Remember when Connor said the only person who knows what I've gone through is Chris Weidman, and it's just like, oh, okay, not drug testing is the answer. I mean, this is going to be bizarre and terrifying to watch. He's gonna throw a leg kick immediately. He's gonna do it immediately, and we're all gonna be like, "Oh no, don't!" Looking through fingers. Is he gonna land? Okay, and then he's probably gonna wrestle Brad Tavares to a decision victory, most likely. What's your overall thoughts on Chris Weidman coming back?
Oh, it's bad. They're bad thoughts and bad feelings. Yeah,
you don't think this is heartwarming? You don't think this is a heartwarming moment to see this man come back and desperately cling on to those glory days?
To his last win, which was 3 years ago now, and I just remember how bad he looked in that fight. No, it was against Akhmedov, basically he was getting handled, but Akhmedov was just making fundamental errors. And Weidman just managed to stay on top of him long enough for a sufficient amount of time in each round to just edge over the line in a decision in which he looked terrible. And he looked like he should have been retired, Joe. We're 3 years later now, fighting Brad Tavares, who could be entering the same type of domain, the same terminal decline, coming off a bad knockout loss in his last fight. But I still think he'll have too much for Chris Weidman. I'll be expecting a Tavares win here for me. Joe, my pick of the fights to watch here actually wasn't Chris Weidman, I confess.
Oh, I know what it is. I just saw the next name on the card.
I love a bit of RoboCop, Joe, but it's not that man either.
No way.
It's actually the unheralded Brad Katona.
Yes.
Joe, Brad Katona is really, really good. He's been really good for a long time, but he's got zero pizzazz to him. Every fight's a kind of decision, and he can't cut a promo. I would love to show you just a little. Can you picture Brad Katona, Joe? Do you have him in your mind's eye?
I saw a picture of him earlier, and he had bruises on his face and he was wearing glasses. So all it made me think of was Rory McDonald. Like that's
okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like the sort of cold, slightly bland, but you know that he's a psychopath underneath. Quality to him. I mean, he's got some interesting wins, including a submission win over Bryce Mitchell on The Ultimate Fighter.
Joe, he's really good. He was much more promising than Bryce Mitchell on that episode of The Ultimate Fighter. He's doing it again now. This is off the Chandler McGregor Ultimate Fighter edition, which I know has slipped both of us by. Last time he came into the UFC off the Ultimate Fighter, won his first fight, slipped a loss to Merab Tavashvili. We know there's no shame in that. Dropped another one, and suddenly he was booted off out the UFC. Went on to become the champion in Brave, and then got his invite back via the Ultimate Fighter into the UFC. Joey's good, and I really hope he can get a proper run in the UFC this time. So that is my featured prelim for you there.
You know what? That's a really good one. And Brad, best of luck to you, pal. We're pulling for you here on Hold On, I'm Talking, brother. Now, listeners, very briefly, we're going to talk about the news. And the news is very simple. Israel Adesanya is fighting in Sydney in 4 weeks' time against Sean Strickland for the middleweight title. It's not an exhibition. It's not a fight night main event. He's defending his title against Sean Strickland. I mean, you're a fan of Sean Strickland, weirdly enough. I don't know why. How are you feeling about this?
It's his politics, Joe. They just really get me.
They're illuminating.
I'm just on board with that man. He's a visionary. No, let me just put a disclaimer out there. That's not my true. That was a joke. It was humour. Although he may say some, the thing is, Sean Strickland will say something at some point that everyone can agree with because he has a real scattergun approach. Yes. And then in the next sentence, he'll say something that horrifies you, and you need to create distance from. Yes. That's for sure. What he is, Joe, is he is quite fun. He is quite fun. He did upset Israel in that press conference when him and Pereira were going to fight. It was quite funny, and I got to be honest. I'll watch Joe. I'll watch his interviews. Dark secret.
Oh, what? Wait, you watch all his interviews with like Helen Yee and the Schmo and that other lady?
I refuse to listen to the Schmo for any sustained period of time. So no, I categorically do not. That's another thing I want to distance myself. The Schmo. And his
what would you be more embarrassed about? People knowing that you like Sean Strickland, or people that know that you've watched the Schmo? What's more embarrassing?
I thought like Strickland's got the profile, so I'm gonna say it's Strickland. Right. But the Schmo, there's some skeletons in that closet, and they're going to be found out in 10 years with various confessionals. Now, I'm fine with this fight, Joe. The fight.
You made the Schmo sound like the Catholic Church for a moment there. Like that was big. That's a big statement you put out there. Sorry. Anyway, go on. Sorry, we're going way off board here.
I'm fine with it. Look, Duplessis is not available. That is obviously the fight to make. Strickland, after he knocks out Adesanya, fights Duplessis. That's fun, isn't it?
Can I just tell you something? Dricus Duplessis' next fight won't be for the title. He's not going to get a title fight next because Hamzat's coming. He's going to be at middleweight soon. He's coming to middleweight, and Israel's already said some stuff about Hamzat because that's just what he does. He lines up his fights really well. He wanted Duplessis couldn't get him, got Strickland instead, so now he has to pivot to that. It's quite interesting what you said, that the UFC didn't want to give Strickland the fight because of his personality and persona, and that they're worried about how they'll be perceived. This is a company that promotes what's it called? Slap fighting? What's it called? Is it slap fight? Power slap, that's it. Power slap. That's not me doing a bit, by the way. I genuinely forgot the name of it. Happily promote that, and dog shit movies, and condoms, and every other shit that you can imagine at the bottom of a Poundland bargain bucket. Yeah. Don't know if I really pay that much heed from Adesanya, but it will be interesting to see nonetheless, even if I don't think it's particularly competitive.
No, of course, no one thinks it will be, but that can be part of the fun. That does create the possibility of something. I mean, can Adesanya do what Pereira did? Will he do that? Well, that's, does he have to fight in a way that will open some opportunity for Strickland? I don't know. Like, I suspect not. I suspect Adesanya will outpoint him, actually.
Yeah, but a couple of days ago, I was suspecting Aljamain Sterling was going to beat Sean O'Malley quite comfortably. But listen to what I picked. I picked Sean O'Malley by knockout. So, listeners, be warned. Do not skip the preview episode for UFC 293, where we will talk about Adesanya versus Strickland in 4 weeks' time, so not far away. Right, listeners, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. We will be back next week to review this card. You can contact us at holdonbrother69@gmail.com. Like, subscribe, leave a comment underneath. We will get back to you in the comments, or if it's particularly good, we will respond to it on the show. Lastly, we will go through our picks again through the main card, this time going from the bottom up. Pedro Munhoz versus Marlon Vera. Tom has picked Munhoz by decision, and I've picked Marlon Vera by decision.
Let's go. Let's go.
You are loving that. You are like hyped for that. I feel like you've got the hatred for Vera that everyone else has for Sean O'Malley. We both chose Mario Batista to defeat Damon Blackshear by decision. We've both picked Ian Garry to defeat Neil Magny by knockout. We've both picked Zhang Weili to beat Amanda Lemos. I chose submission. Tom chose TKO, KO, ground and pound. And for the main event, we are split. Tom has chosen Aljamain Sterling by submission. Is that correct? If I remember that correctly?
Yeah, that's right.
And I've chosen Sean O'Malley by knockout. If I'm going to give you a round number 1. Listeners, we'll be back next week to review this card. Maybe on Sunday, maybe on Monday, but we will be back to talk about it. Join us then.
That's a promise.
That is a promise. See you later. Good night, goodbye, and enjoy the fights.